Hello, we are from Group 4, and before going to the presentation, let us introduce ourselves first. There are 5 members of Group 4, and the first is Sahnan Al-Hassan. Second, I am myself, Diella Ariel Laksono, Raihan Akram Al-Aqib, Muhammad Fathurrijal, and last Diorama Huga Fernanda. As a support of popular literature subjects, we would like to present one of the chapters of popular fiction book, and our discussion today is about 4 theory. These are reader response theory, aesthetic response theory, reception theory, psychoanalytic theory, and popular fiction research. And we don't forget to explain the purpose of reading literature as well. And we are going to the first theory. Let's see. Reader response theory. Okay, let's see the first 2 points. This theory suggests that the reader is an active element that communicates the reality of literature. The reader furnish or complete digestion through interpretation. Okay. Aside from the theory of formalism, which interprets the role of readers and the reintroduction of literature, the reader theory response indicates that the reader is an active element that communicates the reality of literature, or, in other words, that the reader supplements preconception by interpretation, like Stanley Fish put in his theory. Okay, let's see what Stanley Fish said. The reader's activities are the center of attention, where they are regarded not as leaning to meaning, but as having meaning. So, let's see the last 2 points. Text cannot be considered an object of study because it has no meaning. It is in context that where digestion occurs. This theory emphasizes the importance of the role of the reader in the interpretation of the text. Okay, let's back to the Stanley Fish quotation. What does it mean? Mm. In Fish preconceived frame, the text cannot be dismissed as an object of study because it has no meaning. When the text is presented to the reader, it is blank, and when the reading process happens, that's when it was written. Okay, so when the text is read by the reader, then that's where it got meaning. From that, this theory is called the reader response. So we know that the response of the reader is really matter in this theory because when the text is presented, it is blank. It's nothing. But when the reader start to read the text, so that's all where everything's begin. Then that's where it's got meaning. So yeah, it's called the reader response.
Aesthetic response theory. This theory is based on the dialectic relationship between text, reader, and action. The aesthetic of a text is not present in the text, but it is in the process of reading. Although it involves the reader, this theory is not focused on the impact of the text on the reader, but on the aesthetic points of the text. Beauty in literature is in the process of its main point, which is language. There is no literature without language. So, the theory is actually a continuation of the previous reader theory response. The difference is that these two theories have different focal points. Another from the reader's response theory, which focuses on the reader's interpretation, the spatial response itself focuses on the textual aesthetic. What it means is it focuses on the aesthetic points of the text. The aesthetic points mean here is the interaction of the reader with the text. The study of the text with various psychological, social history approach, the understanding of the process of reading, all of this is the centerpiece of the unconscious response theory. Therefore, what is said that the beauty of the literature lies in how the language of the text is expressed. And the purpose of reading literature. First, the purpose of popular fiction is to empower knowledge, not gain knowledge. Use knowledge, not to acquire knowledge. Why is that so? Because the book of knowledge reveals the experience of its author, and the knowledge it acquires through it is intended to enliven and empower the knowledge we already have. And the second is to be a rich cultured human, spiritually enrichment and learn to express things in a good way.
Okay, so will be explain about reception theory. Reception theory can be said to be a theory that examines literary text by starting with the reader who gives reaction or response to the literary text. The difference in response between one reader and another reader is due to differences in the expectation horizon of each of these readers. So the study of the reception can be said to deny the research on the production of literary works, because this theory implies that the meaning is produced by the reader or the audience. The object of study is the reception is to examine the history of the interaction between the reader and the text, or between the audience and the film. The reception also the reception study also examines that interpretation of text, but not directly on the interpretation of the text itself, and also includes the interpretation of the text that has been done by the researcher. Kohler and Jane Tompkins, as experts in text study, show that studying culture, literature, and art is never confined to the study of the meaning of the text alone. According to Kohler, 1981, among text research, text can be researched by: first, examine the function or role of literature in society or social awareness; second, develop literary history as an institution; third, exploring the historical relationship between literature and other literary forms; fourth, understand the role and psychological effects of functional discourse; five, provide a type of function and a relationship theory, both mimetic and non-mimetic, between literature and other factors that indicate the reader's subjective experience. So from Kohler's explanation, it can be concluded that the study of reception can include things like the ones mentioned above.
There are three different concepts of psychoanalysis. First one, psychoanalysis as a science studied in psychology, and psychoanalysis as a medical practice whose application is carried out by psychologists, and as a tool in analyzing anthropological literature and text applied by scientists in the humanities science. But in this case, we are just discussing psychoanalysis as a tool in analyzing literature. In the context of popular fiction research, psychoanalysis is considered as a method. Its use in literary research can also be separated. The first method, psychoanalysis, is used to explain literary relationships, actions, and motives. This use is a method used by Freud and developed mostly by psychoanalysts. The second method, psychoanalysis as an aesthetic discourse in literary narrative structure. The approach applied here is like applied in semiotic discourse in the context of language. The basis for thinking in the second usage here is researcher, and research forms a literary construct. The third one is used in the narrative analysis itself. The thing that intended in here is to analyze the character of the story who has psychiatric disorders or analyzing psychological aspects of story characters. Analysis with this approach is a thematic analysis, so that the analysis is more of an intrinsic analysis of the popular fiction texts. And the next one is used as an approach in the context of historical, ideological, and cultural research. In this context, we study how and when psychoanalysis appears in discourse culture. For example, analyzing literature through a feminist approach by analyzing the differences between men and women. In the end, the differentiation corner the position of women in certain positions. And fifth, psychoanalysis is used in researching the process of literary creation. The process of creating popular fiction in form novels or films. This is examined in terms of more on the production process than with the reader or audience.
But according to Kaplan, there are at least six aspects of psychoanalysis that need to be understood in applying this method in literary studies. First, psychoanalysis as a talking cure, which is divided into two, namely when the analysis is described exactly as a psychoanalysis examine a patient. The other is the theory of human development, found by Freud (1960) in the basic concept of child development. Second, psychoanalysis is used to explain literary relationships, action, movies, and the presence of a text. Third, psychoanalysis is a structural aesthetic discourse, the main aesthetic category applied in the practice of psychoanalysis and seen as a narrative model of literary work. Fourth, psychoanalysis is narrative discourse used in literary or film text. Researchers study psychoanalysis as a fictional theme, such as saying the mental health of the main character in fiction. Fifth, psychoanalysis as a discourse on history, ideology, and culture. Researchers here studying how and when psychoanalysis enter cultural discourse. This can be seen, for example, by feminists analyzing in the way in which psychoanalysis is used as a discipline to suppress women or put women in a position certain in its social sphere. Six, psychoanalysis is a process used by critics to see the text process and place the text in relation to the reader or audience. Psychoanalysis theory can be used whether in the context of relationship between the audience or the reader and the text, or the process of reading or watching popular fiction in the context of social and cultural. Popular, popular fiction creates dream for the reader or audience. These dreams is a symbolic fulfillment of the audience or reader expectation. Psychoanalysis theory as an approach in popular fiction research can be used to see readers or viewers not as people, but as artificial constructs that are produced and activated as tools of popular fiction.